Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we are diving into an absolutely massive and honestly a fascinating topic: India's population. We hear about it constantly, right? But we're going to peel back the layers of the data and look at it in a completely new light.
Just take a look at this, the sheer diversity of a nation's people. We see different ages, professions, backgrounds. It's this incredibly vibrant tapestry. But it brings us directly to a central, pressing theme for us today. We so often hear the phrase population explosion thrown around like it's an absolute crisis, an overwhelming burden on land, food, and infrastructure. But today, we're going to explore the facts to see if these numbers might actually represent an unparalleled opportunity. So what is it? A crisis or a nation's ultimate wealth?
Section 1: The Population Equation. Let's look at the numbers because they are staggering. According to the 2011 census, India held 17.5% of the entire world's population. We're talking 121.02 crore people. That's roughly 1.2 billion individuals. It's a breathtaking figure, placing India second only to China globally. But here is the real kicker. That massive 17.5% of the global population, they occupy only 2.4% of the world's land area. Literally just 2.4%. Just let that sink in for a second. You have nearly a fifth of humanity playing musical chairs on just over 2% of the globe's surface. Section 2: Visualizing the explosion. Okay, picture a standard Jeep back in 1961. It's carrying a perfectly normal, reasonable number of passengers, right? Now, fast forward 50 years to 2011 and look at that exact same Jeep. It is absolutely overflowing, with people hanging off the sides and the roof. That, right there, is the population explosion visualized. It's a term used for the period roughly between 1971 and 2001, when annual growth exceeded 2%. It shows the intense literal pressure on infrastructure caused by a really high birth rate combined with a suddenly plummeting death rate. Section 3: The Demographic Transition. So, why exactly does this explosion happen? Well, according to the theory of demographic transition, every single country goes through three distinct stages as it develops economically. In the first, primitive stage, growth is actually low because both birth and death rates are terribly high. India was there before 1921. Then comes the second stage. Medical advances cause the death rate to drop rapidly, but the birth rate stays high. This is the explosion phase, where India currently sits, though it's right on the verge of the third stage. In that final stage, things like education and urbanization lead to both rates dropping, which finally stabilizes the population. The math of that explosive second stage is actually pretty straightforward. You just look at the gap between your birth rate, that's the fertility rate per thousand, and your death rate. That gap, that gives you your survival rate, and that survival rate is the actual engine driving population growth. Section 4: Drivers of Population Explosion. So, what is keeping the birth rate so stubbornly high? Well, it's deeply woven into the social and economic fabric. Factors like illiteracy and rigid attitudes play a huge role. In India, marriage is essentially a universal social obligation and often happens at a relatively young, legal age. We also see a strong preference for a male child, meaning families might keep having children until they have a boy. Plus, think about the joint family system. It spreads out the financial burden of a new child, making larger families a lot more viable. Combine all of that with a heavy reliance on manpower for agriculture and widespread poverty, where more children literally mean more hands to work, and you've got a compounding recipe for high birth rates. But on the flip side, and this is a really good thing, we have to celebrate the incredibly positive reasons for the low death rate. Amazing improvements in medical health have essentially eradicated old epidemics like smallpox and the plague. Just look at this data point. The infant mortality rate plummeted from 146 per thousand in 1951 down to just 47 in 2011. That is a massive human triumph. Add in better nutrition programs like midday meals in schools and the establishment of the National Disaster Management Authority in 2005, and it makes total sense why survival rates have skyrocketed. Section 5: Impacts and Interventions. Now, obviously, the sheer volume of people creates an intense, immediate strain on basic amenities. We're talking increased pressure on land and agriculture, imbalances in the food supply, which can quickly drive up inflation, and a whole host of environmental and social problems. Basically, when the population outgrows the economy, the government simply has to step in with proactive measures. To manage this delicate balancing act, the government introduced the National Population Policy of 2000. And this framework aimed to manage population not through harsh mandates, but by actively improving the quality of life. The goals focus heavily on health and education, free schooling up to age 14, drastically reducing infant and maternal mortality, ensuring universal immunization, and encouraging delayed marriages for girls. The ultimate endgame of the NPP? To achieve a stable population by the year 2045.
Section 6. The ultimate human resource.
This brings us to a huge perspective shift. Back in 1990, the UN Development Program introduced this brilliant concept of human development. As they noted, the enrichment of human lives is the real wealth of a society. Think about it. Nature's bounty, the land, water, minerals, it only becomes significant when people find it useful. It is people, with their demands and abilities, who turn nature into actual resources. Therefore, the human resource is the ultimate resource. A population constitutes a nation's most valuable asset.
Now, human resources, like any other resource, aren't equally distributed across the globe. They differ constantly in education, literacy, age, and sex. Their numbers and characteristics are always changing. So economic growth is really just a tool. Human development is the actual goal. When a nation invests in healthy, educated, and motivated people, they naturally lower infant mortality, spark incredible innovation, and increase overall productivity. It even contributes to a more stable political environment. Investing in human development solves the population problem from the inside out.
And this is exactly where education becomes a total superpower. As UNESCO points out, population education isn't just about memorizing statistics. It's an educational program aimed at developing rational and responsible attitudes towards our families and our world. It teaches the next generation to care deeply about both the quality and the quantity of human resources.
Section 7. Reaping the demographic dividend.
This all culminates in something called the demographic dividend. This happens when a massive chunk of your total population is actually of working age. And right now, this is India's massive competitive advantage globally. If this huge pool of working age people is healthy, educated, and employed, they hold incredible potential to absolutely skyrocket economic growth. They aren't dependents, they are producers, innovators, and consumers.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this to ponder. If we stop seeing 1 billion-plus people merely as a daunting statistic and start treating them as the ultimate human resource, what limits can we possibly break in the future? If we invest deeply in health and education right now, that population explosion might just become the greatest global advantage of the 21st century. Thank you so much for joining me, and as always, keep questioning the data.